All right, welcome to another episode of Less Kevin, More Technology from UTECIT.com. So this week, Kevin, we got a great guest. Kevin?
I was going to say, there's no Kevin this week.
Kevin, you're looking different.
Much better, right?
Yeah, exactly, an improvement. It looks like you've been
Younger,
dieting, working out.
yeah, right, exercising.
Wow. So Tom Harrison this week is stepping in for Kevin. He's our Chief Operating Officer. We've got a couple of fantastic guests on our episode this week, and they're going to give us a real good flavor of what's going on in the public policy world with the state of Michigan. So let's go around the table and introduce.
Well, I'm Andy LaBarre. I'm here, I think, in my role as Vice President for Government Relations at the Ann Arbor IPSI Chamber. I'm also quietly a member of the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners and a general fan and so forth of Mr. Clemente.
Hey, you're already kind. Ed Clemente. I work for the MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, senior advisor on trends and development. So that's my current job.
Yeah, so you're kind of charting the leading trends of what's going on in Michigan and how we can plan for the future for a prosperous economic future for the state of Michigan.
Yeah, well, I wish it was a plan, but it's more like anyone that says they're a futurist. I don't know if the word futurist really is the right term to describe somebody. Mainly what you're doing is kind of creating different scenarios, and you try to pick the least harmful one for your path, because it's a lot harder to predict the way the future is going to be.
Right.
It's a lot easier to try to do sort of process of elimination or deductive reasoning, when you're looking at the future, kind of.
So, Ed, before we get into the future, let's talk a little bit about the past.
Good.
Right. So, Ed and myself know each other from way, way back. And Ed is, he understands small business about as good as anybody, right?
Yeah, I didn't have a choice.
Yeah, you didn't have a choice.
Legally, I started getting paid when I was 12. Yeah. But they had me in there.
You'd been working long before that.
Well, my family, we're kind of immigrant family from Italy. But, we had a restaurant, and that's how Les knew us. But Les, more importantly, grew up by my cousins, or my uncle, my godparents, both Joe and Alice Clemente, and cousin Paul's closest to your age, right?
Yep. So I just got to set the stage, because in the Downriver community, it's a very colloquial area.
It's a separate ecosystem from the rest of the state.
It is. It really is. And there's certain small businesses that have been there forever, and people just everywhere, they know them, right? So your grandmother started the business in 1955, I want to say, somewhere like that?
Well, let me help you out.
Yes,
I need it. And this will tie into your last question, actually. But we had one of the first liquor licenses downriver in 1933. And I'm going to ask Andy, what was 1933? What happened?
There's some sort of depression that was not good. It may have been great.
But what ended in 1933?
Prohibition. Right?
Yeah. So we might have got a little head start.
Yeah.
But, the thing for us is because we were immigrants, right? And you see this today in any small business, especially people who come first generation. Your whole family works.
Yeah.
So we had the same thing. Paul worked. I worked. I had 4 cousins on that side. We all had to work there eventually. But it was it's a restaurant, bar, and bowling alley. So it did Andy's been there actually a few times.
And institution is the only word that really.
Correct.
I mean, it was. You were at Clemente's.
Yeah.
There was no two ways about it. It was great.
Well, in fact, originally, so just so you know, the actual length of it was 1930 through.
I did not know it went
through
back
2010. Well, the only reason I mention that's because tomorrow I don't want to date the podcast, but. I'm actually dedicating a bench that's for Clemente's Restaurant at the Lincoln Park Historical Commission.
Get out of here.
Yeah, it's going to be a little ceremony. And what it's going to be is just going to say that, but it says 1930 through 2010 is when it closed. And I should mention that was my last year in the legislature. And just as someone, you own a business, I was working at the restaurant the whole time I was a state rep.
Yeah.
And not because I was just trying to be
Right.
nice. I didn't get paid.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
But very few people know how to fix the machines, the bowling alley.
It's just your responsibility to your family.
And pizza,
Yeah.
kids wouldn't show up to work. I'd still have to go make pizzas, even like I was in my 50s.
So, as a downriver guy, I
Yeah.
will just tell you you guys remember the TV show in the 70s, Laverne and Shirley?
Of course.
Shamil Shamazel.
Yeah. So you remember the bowling alley there?
Yes.
All right. So that's what Clemente's was. So when Ed's talking about a single building with a restaurant and a bar and a bowling alley, we're talking 6 lanes, a restaurant that was probably 20 feet wide, maybe.
Yeah, it was almost like 3 narrow, like if you'd see on a storefront in downtown, similar to the building we're in.
Yeah.
This would be just like the bar. This section, the next section would have been the restaurant, and then the third section would have been 6 lanes.
And so how many people could you seat in your restaurant?
Legally?
Yeah. Legally.
I think we were 180 or something like that.
Okay.
But that's all 3 parts, right?
Right.
So the front half of the bowling alley was considered by state law like a lounge.
Right.
So you could have people up there watching bowlers and things like that.
Yeah.
But we had, and just so any bowling experts out there, we had AMF machines, not Brunswick's. Brunswick's.
Getting into the dirty, gritty part of
Yeah,
bowling now.
the AMFs were a little better than Brunswick's. But I used to work on Brunswick's too. They were a lot of work too.
Yeah. So his uncle Joe taught all of us how to bowl, and this place was so small that what he would do, and for all of you bowling aficionados, right? There's pin bowling and there's spot bowling, and spot bowling is where you want to go. So he'd hang a curtain. He'd get out there and hang a curtain across the bowling alley so we couldn't see the pins.
Oh, you're right. So you had to hit your spot.
You had to hit the spot.
So those like
Oh, that's
6
interesting.
arrows.
Yeah.
So you didn't aim for the pins
don't.
necessarily. You aimed for the spot on the lane.
That's what they're there for.
Right.
Well, even
That's
professional.
that's how I bowl,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, most professional bowlers now, it's so much different than back then because there was no even really side weights back then. Nowadays, you'll see guys come at the end of Clemente's, guys are walking in with 3 and 4 bowling balls.
Yeah.
Because they would have one if there was too much oil.
Right.
If
Yeah.
they were like just had to pick up a 7 pin or a 10 pin, they'd have a separate ball for those. So it got much more sort of not old school,
Yeah, technical.
Yeah. But okay, so
inexpensive.
Yeah.
you have a lot of small business history, and you understand that side of the world quite well. As a matter of fact, Paul, who I grew up with, which is his cousin, Paul told me that during the whole span of your organization, there was never 1 minute when there was the cash register was open and there wasn't a Clemente in the building.
Well, anyone that's run their own business,
Yeah.
and it's a cash business, you got to remember. I know you guys seem like you have a theme for bourbon here, but anytime you've got something that's not really tightly regulated, you almost have to be kind of like have a passive restraint around you all the time.
Yeah, you've got to keep an eye on it. There is no question about it.
Yeah, and it's nothing against anyone that worked there because actually most of our employees were there forever, so it really wasn't that big of a
Right.
problem. But I think anyone that even today that has like a cash business, it's still something you gotta kind of keep a radar on at all times. And for us, because we're Italian, it had to be blood, basically. Like, not that I would say in-laws weren't allowed, but
Second rate. Let's be honest.
Blood is a little different.
it's very omerta. Yes.
So just one closing part on that always cracked me up. Your Uncle Joe, the family, we'll put it that way, invested money in a point-of-sale system.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So you guys, I'm just going to tell you, I used to get a double hamburger pepperoni pizza there. It was phenomenal. And you guys had a certain way of making it where you put the toppings. Nobody else does it out, in the world today that I've seen. And so everyone in the back's Italian, and you guys bought this point-of-sale system, and the little printer goes into the back, and what happened? Do you remember?
No, go ahead. Tell
They couldn't read it.
Oh, because it was English.
It was in English.
Yeah.
And so, well, I think I...
So that went away.
No, I didn't. I remember because
No, they had to get a bus kid or someone to read it.
Yeah, to come in and read the order.
No, they had to teach in the back the different, nomenclature, whatever the word is.
Yeah, the nomenclature.
Yeah.
Andy wanted to say something. funny.
Well, I remember in 2010, Jeff, your cousin, my boss and friend, he took us to help one day with sort of taking down some of the stuff at Clemente's, and his grandpa, your
Joe, Uncle
Joe, yeah,
Right.
gave us some old bowling pins. I'd forgotten about that. That and then sauerkraut pizza, right? Did you guys have that? Is that
Yeah,
is that
it's-
still?
So I know the show is supposed to be about other stuff, and this is more of
this
a
is
reminiscence for Les, I think, more than anyone.
No, we're gonna get there.
But we used to have a Peace Lutheran League. So we're Catholic because we're Italians, right? But the Lutherans, they were just down the road from us, and they had their own league. And I think Uncle Joe at one point, maybe as a joke, he cooked sauerkraut and put it on a pizza for them. You know, I mean, they were fun guys. I knew them all pretty well. It was a mixed league, actually. Anyway, they liked it so much, and then they wanted it all the time, every time they'd come in on Tuesday nights. And then other leagues started hearing about it, so it kind of took off its own life. And then, not that there's a season for sauerkraut, but we had 2 seasons for sauerkraut pizza. We didn't offer it year round. It was either at the holidays, Christmas, or it was at the end of the bowling season.
Interesting.
So yeah.
And how was it?
Oh, I liked it too, and I don't even like sauerkraut.
Right. It would be the kind of pizza I would eat. I would love a sauerkraut pizza.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, like, in fact, one of my remarks will be when we dedicate the bench tomorrow, will be a day doesn't go by one of our family members asked us why we closed, are we going to reopen it, and what are the recipes?
Right.
We either get one of those 3 questions, and the sauerkraut pizza is probably the number 1 question.
Wow. So your small business family, decades and decades, and bridged over after endearing actually into the public sector.
How did I get to the public sector?
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting because my family was dead set against it.
Yeah.
They really didn't like politics. I basically broke the path for Jeff because when you own a small business, if anyone's been in a small town, Lincoln Park's not really a small town, but it's kind of small. It's like 30,000 people, but you don't want to ever upset either party, mayors, council people. So they weren't really excited about it. Like, we did a lot of stuff for the Little League Baseball, and we sponsored hockey teams and all those kind of things. But you really stayed out of politics. We'd never put lawns up. Like they did not put up any lawn signs for me, my family, when I ran for office. My mom did, but that was when I first ran for trustee for the college, which was a different job I had before. But like, they wouldn't put them up.
Right.
And it did bother me. And they also made sure, we would never have a fundraiser either.
Right.
At the restaurant. And there's some restrictions with that, by the way, too, when you have a liquor license. But go ahead, you're going to.
Well, no, I was going to ask. So why do you think they wouldn't put the signs up?
Oh, because
they just didn't want to declare a side.
Yeah, because
Right.
I think it was more to the other side than to
Sure,
me.
I agree. Yeah.
I think it was more if I lost, they didn't want to have harsh feelings
Right.
with whoever won. Right. But they wouldn't even put up like local city council people, none of that. I mean, it wasn't just me, it was everyone. And it softened up a little bit actually after Paul Clemente got elected.
Yeah.
They started putting up signs because I think it was his kid, It was like, all of a sudden the rules changed, but it worked out.
Yeah, that's good. So from there, because you've had...
Why I say I worked there, I should have mentioned that. I got my very first job working for a state senator right out of college. My first degree was at Ferris, and then I got a degree in public administration, and I started working for a senator who was from downriver, and then so I did 4 years stint up in Lansing.
Who was that?
His name's Jim DeSena. I don't know if you remember him. Yeah.
He ran against the boss.
Yeah, he switched party. When I worked for him, he was a Democrat.
Yeah.
And then he switched and ran against John Dingell, and that caused a lot of...
He did not win?
No.
But he
won.
ran against Dingell in, what'd you say, 96?
I don't
Is that
know.
what you
You
said?
were working for him? Were you
No,
working
but
for John?
I think he ran in 94 and 96.
I don't remember, but I do know that it like split up downriver a lot.
Wow.
There was a lot of grief, let's say. At that time, I was president, I think, of the chamber. Maybe I was back then. I can't remember for sure the actual lineage.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's how I sort of got into it, was working, as a staff guy. And Andy will tell you, when you work as a staff guy for any public office person, you really do 360 of everything that, you won't believe the stuff you got to do sometimes and how many people are mad at stuff and got to follow through. And it's a true way to get to know your community.
Yep.
Have the two of you ever worked on a campaign together, or?
Oh, we worked on John's campaign.
Yeah,
goals and
the coordinated campaign efforts.
governors. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was always a Democrat, moderate Dem, but I was always a Dem.
Yeah.
First chance I had to work with Ed, in a campaign context was 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you were running for your last term at that time.
No, 2006, that would have been my first term. I got elected in 2004. So my last term would have been 2008, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. But I know that we were doing So when they run when they run campaigns, they're called coordinated campaigns. So a lot of it will be on like the same ticket, and they'll help sponsor and help people out. Like I'm sure we did door to door before.
Yep.
I mean, I've knocked on more doors than paper boys, So
Wow.
it's like, it's a lot of work.
Which is its own unique experience.
Oh yeah, I did. I think I did 7,000 to 9,000 doors just for my campaign that I knocked personally.
Yeah, it's a very grassroots effort, isn't it?
It's
to
a
do those
very
kinds of
humbling because you really don't know what's on people's minds, and I would say 1 out of 10 people wanted to talk to you,
Yep.
maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they would give you an earful, but most of the time they were nice. Some people were jerks, but it just depended.
Yeah. And it's all great in concept till you hit that first door and have to get the words out of your mouth. And I remember one of the first women that ever opened the door for me stopped me mid-sentence and said, "Are you a Jehovah's Witness?" And I said, "No." And she said, "All right, go on." So, I mean, it just stuff that pops up that you're not expecting.
Exactly.
But they think you're going to sell stuff too.
Exactly.
I mean,
Right.
no solicitation you see on doors all the time, and a lot of people still do door-to-door sales. You'd be surprised, like windows or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
right.
People are selling stuff all the
Yeah,
time, door-to-door.
absolutely.
So it doesn't go away, especially in the suburbs, So it's they never know who's coming to the door. Plus, I remember knocking at when I was helping Mark Corvo.
Yeah.
Remember on that one, he was in Northville. And I remember we went to this really nice, swanky subdivision, and I got kicked out because because the whole subdivision had, and I don't think it was a binding ordinance, but you couldn't do door-to-door there.
Sure.
Because I don't think you really can do that, but you just didn't argue because they had their own patrol cop.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's
at least you didn't make the front page of the Mellis, even though they don't call it that anymore.
no one does. Yeah, the key is always with going door to door is dogs. I think that's the worst thing.
German Shepherd, east side of Ann Arbor, decided I'd irritated him that day and gave me a nice flank shot. Let's just say that.
Wow.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I guarantee I got that vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had some pretty rough. I did a lot of door to door for other candidates in Detroit too, and I had Ecorse, Rouge, Lincoln Park, Melvindale, and a lot of pit bulls.
Wow.
Yeah, and you don't know what you're walking into.
You don't. The worst thing actually that scared me the most were screen doors.
Yeah. It's like an invitation to come on in if you dare.
Right.
And the dog can go through them
Yeah, exactly.
pretty fast. But
So how did you get into the Liquor Control Commission at that point?
well, so from the state rep, I did another job. This is all post chamber. Right?
Yeah.
And I was actually got hired by Diane Byron.
Yeah.
She's big. She was the House leader when I was in the legislature, and she now ran a PR firm. So anyway, I ran a Green Energy Advanced Manufacturing Technology Chamber of Commerce. It's called Energy Innovation Business Council. It's still
What year
around.
was that?
2010, the year I left the legislature. And so I started, I think it was a 501c3, 501c6, or a
Ahead
C4.
of your time on that one.
Pardon?
Ahead of your time on that one.
Oh, I had some really good. The biggest chunk of what I did beyond the legal bylaws and all that part of it, I had to also recruit a good board, and I had pretty good board members like GE, Dow Corning, Dow Chemical.
Fly-by-night companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're still on that board, I believe, but they were all into some type of either solar, wind, bioenergy, whatever it was. So we had a pretty good group. It was a good organization. But when I was in that job only a little more than a year, I got approached to be a liquor control commissioner, which is actually a pretty big deal. I didn't know it was at the time. I just figured they called me up to do it. But I really, I kind of turned it down a little bit at first because I liked what I was doing. But then I got reapproached by the governor's people, and so that's how it started. So I accepted it.
So that's an appointed.
It's an appointed position. I did 2 full terms, so that's 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. What's
And
that?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's different than what you might think. There's like different positions. There's like an administrative sort of group. There's 5 of us only, but 2 of us mainly we're like traditional. Have you ever heard the word circuit? Like for
Sure.
circuit court judge?
Sure.
So literally we're like a circuit court judge because do you know where that word comes from originally?
No.
Andy might know.
Circuit or court?
Circuit.
No.
So originally, think of Abraham Lincoln and who was the other guy? Douglas, who's he debated?
Right.
Yeah.
They were both they were both attorneys, and they would ride around together in the same wagons and represent the county on a circuit to go visit all the different county courthouses in Illinois, I believe.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So that's where the word circuit comes from. So literally what we did, I think we had 15 to 17 different locations around the state that I would do hearings because the whole purpose of doing the circuit is so it's kind of based for the consumer that they don't have to drive, say, to the Capitol or they don't have. So you make it close to them. So like they'd build up dockets of cases. So when I'd go to the UP or I'd go up to Cadillac or Grand Rapids, the dockets would all be fully fleshed out, and then they would just proceed to do the hearings in front of me.
So what are the issues that come up that you have to hear during these hearings?
There's a good variety, but there's like some big ones. Obviously, the biggest one's probably sales to minors.
Oh.
Andy being from Ann Arbor,
They frown on that. Yeah.
well, especially because of the college kids, they tend to be even. Actually, the places like in Ann Arbor and East Lansing, and maybe Royal Oak, are stricter than even other cities because it's so important to keep that license that they really don't. Usually you get it at party stores and some bars, but so that's one. People being intoxicated, getting DUIs, whatever, that all falls back. As we know, growing up in the bar business, I mean, you're responsible for the last drink, the bar owners are. So no matter how many they had before, walking into your place, if you served them, that falls back on your lap. So a lot of those kind of cases, a lot of things from bounce checks to, bad business management. When you get a liquor license, because you can't think of liquor as like just a glass of bourbon, right? You have to think of it as a controlled substance in the state's eyes, just like medical marijuana or recreational marijuana is now too. So that means that there's a big burden because it's not like you're selling toothbrushes. You probably someone's not going to go get in an accident because they bought a toothbrush. Right?
Generally.
Yeah, unless they don't floss. But I mean, in general, that's why the state takes it so seriously, is because it's a controlled substance. Even though you and I sort of take it for granted and for fun, it's really in the wrong hands can be pretty bad. I mean, I can tell you in the legislature, we were constantly passing legislation for minors driving with other kids, for example, in the car, and especially under 21. Right. So we always knew a lot of the legislation I had passed while I was in the legislature, actually I had to enforce too at the bench level.
Interesting.
There's a lot of other cases, but those
right.
are sort of the big ones, or the most normal ones, I should say, that we get.
Fascinating.
Oh, don't ask me. There's like really sketchy places.
I'm sure.
You'd be imagining that. I
You
won't talk
could write
about
a
them
book.
here. Oh, yes. Just on one segment alone, I could. But anyway.
All right. So now, how did you end up at the MEDC?
So I served 2 terms.
And part of the MEDC is you're now a world famous media guy.
Well, so that all sort of came together at the. So as my term was finishing up, most liquor control commissioners don't get more than 2 terms. It's pretty normal because it's usually new governors and they put their own people in or whatever. So I kind of knew my term would be coming up, but you never know. But then because the governor and I served in the House together as well as when she was in the Senate, I worked with her on a lot of bills. So she knows me pretty well. So we had a discussion and figured out where I wanted to go next. She had some ideas, I had some ideas, and this is the one I think that she liked. And we actually talked about podcasts. That was one of the things that I told her I wanted to do as if I went, and I didn't really notice where I wanted to go, but the thing when I was in the legislature, I would say 90% of my bills were economic development related. I did most of my stuff with the MEDC in the legislature. Plus, when I ran my chamber, I did economic development. Plus, as I did it with community college. I was a trustee for the college. So workforce and economic development are very integrated, as you know. And as you see more and more, and Andy can probably echo this, but the knowledge jobs are going to be the key to the future for Michigan. As workforce jobs sort of like timber with automation and they disappear a little bit, how are you going to get those kind of jobs in the state? So that's sort of what I told the governor at the time. So you got to remember, I got hired in the middle of COVID, so I've really never had an office since I got the job. But that's okay. More of just a field agent, let's say. But the thing is that I do these podcasts. We do them strictly through remote and virtual. Not like as nice as you guys have here. This is like coming, to some plush.
This is top shelf around
Yeah,
here.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised I didn't have to show ID to come in.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So the MEDC, and describe your role as because your title is senior analyst.
yes,
But you
advisor,
seem to be
but close
jack
enough.
or senior. You seem to be jack of all trades. As I look through, all the things that you're involved with in the MEDC.
Well, the key, as we we're talking a little bit about where you need to be. So that was part of it because COVID was so bad. We already assumed there was going to be a recession, which there sort of was with COVID, a little different kind. Supply chain, all of you, I'm sure.
Sure.
Impacted.
Oh, absolutely.
I just had to get a new transmission. It took almost a month to finally get the parts, right?
And that you were lucky.
Yes, absolutely, because it was a kit that just wouldn't show up. And so how do we look at the new world? Because supply chain is definitely going to change. So, in fact, I interviewed the top supply chain professor at MSU, because MSU is like one of the big ones. I've also interviewed, Rebecca Cunningham. I'm looking at Andy.
Yeah.
She's the vice president of research for U of M. So strategically, I'm trying to position the state so that whoever listens to a podcast will somewhat be aspirational for them to say, oh, we should be doing this or we should go in those directions, without the ham-handed fist to say, this is what we
That
need
you have
to
to
be
do
doing.
it, right?
Yeah, because I do believe in the future, I've always believed this in economic development. It's an organic process. You have a lot of people who are experts in economic development, but the reality is things shift so fast, the timing. Go ahead, Andy.
And Ed, you probably saw this too in lesson time. I know you did. I think you saw a sped up and very visible version of sort of the way that businesses evolve organically that happened under pressure and under duress essentially during COVID. I think about restaurants in particular and how they made takeout not just an option, but
The
the
option.
It was
option.
the option. That's
and
right.
Just little innovations that I think were condensed in terms of time, but like you said, they were not essentially mandated do this, but rather find a way to make this work.
It was necessary. It's a matter of survival, right?
Yeah, and America more than other countries is more of a consumer culture. So the consumers really drive a lot of how businesses have to react. But that's on the retail side. So I've always been a firm believer, even when I was at the chamber, that there's wealth creation and wealth churners. So the companies that create wealth, usually the churners have to sort of survive off of those jobs. So like if you're automotive, for example, like UAW jobs create a lot of wealth in the community because you got the 7-Elevens, you get the restaurants, you get people, getting their cars, whatever it is. You need some kind of wealth being created because you just can't live on a retail economy because you need people to be making money, good middle-class jobs. Yeah, middle-class jobs is the key to everything. And so how we get the percentage of our population into jobs where people can afford to have disposable incomes that keeps that sort of economic development churning going on is the key. And there's not really a blueprint, but it's like climbing a mountain, right? You get overwhelmed when you see the mountain, but you really only have one path. You got to go up. You got to figure out what that path is. So you don't have to climb the whole mountain.
Right.
And that's kind of what I think about with a lot of these guests that I have is that they're all providing different little paths, kind of.
Right.
Anyway, that's a
And you
little
just
bit
have to
more
get started, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Michigan's different than other states in that we have so many people that can do stuff. We're not like other states. We to tie up to Clemente, I know we're probably getting near the end here, But Clemente's, I remember when I was working in the bowling alley while I was a state rep, these two guys came in one night and they heard, I don't know if they tried to get office hours with me, but they lived in my district. And they were both engineers. One worked for GM, one worked for Chrysler. And they were coming up with this new idea. And today it's commonplace, so it'll sound like it's not a new idea, but wireless energy. There was no, you know how you can set your phone on a pad.
Right.
And
Q, I think.
there was more, but they were just doing it on their own in a garage in one of their buddies' houses, their own house. But they approached me to say, look, we got this idea. We don't really think it really fits in the automotive industry, but we do believe it's something we want to patent or whatever. Can you help us? So I hooked them up with the MEDC, and I don't know exactly what happened at the end, but that is the difference compared to, say, New York or California or Texas or these other states. We have a lot of blue-collar people who have really great ideas who know how to do stuff. And I mean, even in your industry, with ladders, right, whatever.
Sure.
I mean, you can't get a carpenter right now, right?
No.
Yeah.
No. Finding labor in manufacturing is tough. Very tough. Because a lot of the younger generation are just not used to doing that kind of work or have any interest in it. It's an issue.
Yeah, there's a lot of, say, seniors that won't, like even things like with 3D printing and automation, you still need humans in a lot of things that are kind of skill sets that you don't, it's hard to recreate those. You really can't just create them in a college necessarily.
No, definitely not.
You got to learn through trial and error, being a journeyman or whatever.
Right.
Anyway.
So what are some of the it's good. What are some of the trends you're seeing for the state, and what can we do, and what can
Well,
our
I'll tell you
clients-
something. This is one so I think I mentioned it. As I do more podcasts, more people want to be on the podcast, which is, I'm sure you guys have had the same challenge. But like, I just got invited to go to this place called NBS. It's they outfit, say, Class A office space. So like the furniture in this room, right? And they've got to figure out, because just like government is a lag industry, corporations can be lag industries of what they decide to put in there.
Right.
So with the new world of people being digital nomads, people thinking about what is going to be the hybrid work format, that's what these guys got to be doing. So what are you going to do? And they have some pretty interesting ideas. So I think that's going to be an issue that's not going to go away.
Right.
Because if you think about it, most businesses want people under 40 years old. So millennials and, sort of Gen Z.
Gen Z, yeah.
And they are clearly showing they don't want to be 5 days a week.
Right, in an office.
Or in an office. They want to be with their dog all day, too, whatever it is. And they don't want to do the commute, whatever it is. So that's going to be a challenge because of America. And the other big thing for America, which I touched on earlier, I believe is going to be supply chains.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see more vertical integration in a lot of manufacturing. It doesn't necessarily mean insourcing, like back to the country.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you.
Well, it varies. So, I mean, the advantage of America and the advantage we've had is that supply chains were pretty cheap, especially as China grew.
Right.
But now, as China's even struggling, it's not even like a tariff war or anything. It's just they're just struggling to produce themselves.
They are. That's right.
So that oceans then becomes a hindrance. So is there ways you can either vertically integrate through, say, the Americas, right? Could you be doing other places, the NAFTA kind of things or whatever? But I think you will see more of that, and that'll have to be done at the government level somewhat too.
So, you think about downriver, right? The Rouge plant. Remember the original goal for the Rouge plant was raw materials coming in off of River Rouge and out of the other end, a vehicle.
Well, if you want to read a really good book, you should read a book, and you might have read this, Andy, Fordlandia. So
yeah, I know. I have not read the book, but I know that book.
So it's an older book, but it's pretty cool. But talking exactly about, you're saying Henry Ford, plus or minus all of his goods and bad stuff, he was definitely an innovator. Yeah. He was not like an inventor. I think people mix those two things up. Edison was more of an inventor.
He's a systems guy.
He figured out how to make someone else doing stuff, figure out a better way to do it.
Right, do it faster.
So he figured out how to buy rubber and create rubber plantations in Brazil.
In South America, right?
Yeah, and that's what the Fordlandia, because he was mad at the tire industry, even though he was buddies with Harvey Firestone.
Right.
But because he tried to get Firestone to go in with him, but he wouldn't. But anyway, that's kind of what the book's about, is he wanted to have complete control of everything that went into his vehicle. Do you remember he built soybean cars?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean,
I did not know
The
that.
steel,
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
steel, the iron ore came out of his mines in cities that he controlled and transported on ships that he owned to steel factories. Oh, sure, that was
Yeah.
a big thing.
if you go up, I can't remember the exact name of the product, but I think it's called some kind of charcoal, King something?
Kingsford.
Kingsford. So do you know that's a Michigan company?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you think it's that name?
I
King
don't know.
Ford.
Ford.
Oh,
Ford built this place up in the UP. It still exists, but that's where it comes from. But like he wanted to also control the charcoal and things like that was built in his plants, but then they got, consumer value on it too.
Yeah. Wow. Good
So,
story, Ed.
yeah, well, I used to teach history. I skipped one of my jobs. I used to teach school too for quite a while. I coach sports and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But
We didn't even. We can have an whole podcast on rugby alone.
You should just have an Ed Clemente podcast. Is just go through the chapters of his life. There's much to be gleaned.
Ed,
well,
just real
ADD
quick,
helps. I've been that for a while.
tell them how old you were when you quit playing rugby.
I was 50. I was in the legislature, and it was a good story because it was at U of M because I played rugby for U of M too, and you didn't have to have a degree from there back then. But I was tackling a 19-year-old kid, and I tore this bicep off. You guys can't see
oh
it at
wow!
home, but
I see the scar.
yeah. So this bicep completely came off, and at 50 years old, and I was still actively playing even in the legislature. I'd come in with black eyes, crutches. I was beat up a lot in the legislature,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Good story.
yeah.
Very good, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Ed, we always, we're close to rolling in our sponsor because we're looking for a sponsor and bourbon themed. And so this is for Kings Not Gods. And this bourbon, the company's in Southwest Detroit. We've had them on our podcast. Great people. But do you have a favorite bourbon or flavor?
I'll give you two answers.
Yeah.
For commercial purposes, I like Buffalo Trace.
Okay.
I've been to that. I've done the whole bourbon tour. If you guys haven't done it,
I have not, but I
did it
like
before
to.
even I was a liquor control commissioner. But it's a great it's a great tour, and I love bourbon. But I think the bourbon. This is the funny part. What was the name? Boardwalk Empires. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
So it was about
Nucky something.
Yeah. Right. And Buscemi was the main guy.
Oh,
in it.
I know what you're talking about.
But anyway, this is going back to my family now, so I'll end it with what we started.
Yeah.
Is that we made bootleg stuff growing up, and if you remember how they made their bourbon, they would make the alcohol in the bathtub, right? But
Right.
then they would add tea to make, and then call it a bourbon or a whiskey, depending how much tea they put in it. I would like to have had my grandma's bourbon.
Right.
I don't know what it tastes. I'm sure it wasn't good, but that would be one I'd like to still try.
Awesome. Well, Ed, appreciate you coming down. Whoop. A little.
Oh, sure.
Let's have a little
Yes.
toast.
I can drink on the air.
Okay. There you go.
Okay.
Salute.
Salute, right.